Okay, welcome everybody. Still admitting folks, and I suspect that will continue, but let me do a brief intro, Geoff, with your permission, if you're ready to go ahead and get going.
Sounds great.
Again, welcome everyone, and just, I guess, before we start, rules of the game. First, I am recording this, which may have popped up on your screen for posterity. So if you want to come back and revisit this time after time, feel free to do so. If you're in a position where you can, I always appreciate, and I'm sure Geoff would as well, seeing your smiling faces and being able to kind of read the audience and interact, engage a little bit more. If you're not comfortable with that, completely understand, or not in a position to. In terms of Q&A, et cetera, thank you. Please feel free, and Geoff has reassured me that this is actually welcome. Please feel free to jump in with questions. A couple different ways to do that. Probably the best way is to type in the chat, and I will do my best monitoring the chat and bring those questions to your attention, Geoff. So you're not trying to manage following that conversation. Feel free also to either raise your hand or even just unmute yourself and jump in at any point. So we hope we can make this a little bit interactive. So, all right, with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce Geoff Zentz, who's here delivering the session on improving hunger and health outcomes with technology, and certainly an extremely important area where, unfortunately, we're seeing ongoing inequities and even increasing of some inequities. But Geoff is the Senior Director of Innovation at AgriNovus that is helping address some of these issues. He's building on a history of really helping people transform their great ideas into successful innovations and reality. Within his role at AgriNovus, focusing on some of the most pressing issues in ag bioscience related to hunger, sustainability, food deserts, food inequities, insecurities, et cetera. And I'm sure he'll be sharing more about that. And his role is to connect innovators and entrepreneurs to resources to help solve some of those problems. So I think very salient, hopefully, to some of you. And this is, again, building on what Geoff's been doing through his career. He was managing director of GBeta, Generator's nationwide startup accelerator program. GBeta has multiple verticals, but I believe there's one that is related to either food tech or at least this general area. So certainly a good background for what he's doing. He's also held roles at UpNest, not Next, One Click Ventures, SHS International, and is on the board for the leadership of Johnson County. I would be remiss in not noting, too, that Geoff shares Kim and my passion for cycling, road cycling in particular, but he's been to more exotic places, such as the cobbles of Belgium, the islands of Croatia, and I want to hear how you biked from island to island. That struck me as a tough challenge, so you've figured out how to solve that, which is great, and also the biking paradise of Mallorca, so as well as the hills of Brown County, obviously. So welcome, thanks for being here with us, and we look forward to hearing more about what AgriNovus is doing and how all of us can help these worthwhile efforts.
Todd, thank you so much. And yeah, Croatia was amazing. Didn't have to go between islands. I had a boat for that. But other than that, it was something I would highly recommend if you like to ride your bike. But gang, thanks for having me. I'm always humbled to be able to come in and chat, especially about such an important topic like food security. I think it's something that's really important. I'm going to share my screen here in a second, so I may have trouble seeing everybody. But as Todd teed me up for, please feel free to interrupt. This is absolutely, like, you're not going to throw me off. You're not going to screw something up. Let's actually dive deep, because I think some of what we're going to talk about today, we believe as AgriNovus, we come at this from a little bit different of a lens, and sometimes that brings up really interesting points and things that we can discuss. And I don't have all the answers. I mean, candidly, that's the reality of this space and what we all do. But I think it's really important to dive into that. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up the PowerPoint. And hopefully you all are seeing it now. Got some.
We are seeing your screen.
Beautiful. And we'll get it started. So I will play this.
Excellent.
So I work for AgriNovus, as Todd mentioned, but really this is kind of geared around, and this conversation is geared around something that we do as an organization, which is called the Hunger Tech Challenge. We've been really fortunate to have Elevance Health partner up with us for the last 2 years as we've run this challenge. But what we're going to talk about today is kind of how we view technology innovation as a piece of that improving hunger and health outcomes. Because as you all know that are sitting here in this room today, that hunger is so ingrained in all the other pieces of life. It determines your health outcomes. It determines what goes on in your world, the experiences that you have, and they're all so intertwined. And so we'll talk a little bit about AgriNovus first. We'll talk a little bit about what the Hunger Tech Challenge is, where it came from, and then we'll talk about the 2 specific challenges that we've run to date. And I'll leave you with some takeaways, and feel free to chime in with any questions as you've got as we go along the way. So who is AgriNovus Indiana? So we are part of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. So that was formed back in '99, really geared around strategic and collaborative efforts within industry in the state of Indiana. AgriNovus, as you can probably guess from the name, has to do with the ag bioscience industry here in the state of Indiana. So we're mainly focused on growing and supporting the growth of ag bioscience in the state of Indiana. We have 5 other sister initiatives that all have individual focuses as well. You probably are familiar with BioCrossroads, Connexus, Ascend Indiana, TechPoint, and recently Energy Systems Network was a sister company. They've spun out on their own and now they walk on their own 2 feet. But we're all part of geared towards supporting the growth of those specific verticals in the state of Indiana through that Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. And how we view this is our ag bioscience economy is kind of 5-fold. You'll see here the 5 different big pieces of what we consider the ag bioscience economy: value-added food and nutrition, animal health and nutrition, plant science and crop protection, and ag tech and ag equipment and systems. Those 4 kind of stand alone that are all enabled by that 5th one, which is production agriculture. This is really how we catalyze what the ag bioscience economy looks like in the state of Indiana. And part of what we do is we research and make sure we understand what's going on in that economy. So back in 2018, you'll find that research plays a lot of a role in what we do. In 2018, we set out for the first time to really put a number around what does that economy look like in the state of Indiana, and we got a number of $52 billion. If you ever want to talk numbers, I'm happy to break these down. I've got all of them individually, but I think it's important to understand that that's where we started in 2018. And our goal as an organization, we came up with the Grow 2024 framework for our organization. We believe that we could help grow that economy by a certain dollar amount by 2024. And
hey, Geoff, let me jump in for a second.
Fire away, Todd.
Yeah, so I'm curious. You mentioned kind of the sister organizations within CICP, which, by the way, for the audience, if you're not aware of it, CICP has been doing great things in the state of Indiana, encouraging public-private cooperation, very good partners with the universities and not-for-profits, but also closely connected to, obviously, the for-profit sector. But, you know, it's interesting to me when you talk about some of these challenges, particularly in food tech, there are clear connections to TechPoint and BioCrossroads in terms of health. So, and maybe you're going to address that later, but if not, I was just curious to hear how you see the AgriNovus connection to some of the sister organizations, if you will.
Yeah, Todd, that's a great question. And one of the things that I'm the most excited about, I've only been with the organization for a little over a year. And in that year, we have more cross collaboration than our organization has ever had in the past. Let's take Hunger Tech, for example. TechPoint and BioCrossroads support us in doing that. And so we work with the TechPoint team because they understand the tech landscape and can help us get there. We work with BioCrossroads because they have excellent data with Analytics IN and all of the information that can help play into this. And we as an organization then do the same stuff for their initiatives and the things that they're driving forward. But what's really cool about it, and I think this is one of the things, especially this wasn't part of my talk today, but you teed me up so well, I have to walk down this path, is I think it's one of the things that makes Indiana the best place in the country to start a business, is because we have such cross-functional support when it comes to entrepreneurial ideas, how to get business growing and going. I really believe that part of that is kind of that Hoosier hospitality of like, we are willing to put resources together to support for the greater good. And the CICP being part of this team has been such a reminder of what makes Indiana special when it comes to those opportunities. So that's a great question. And we do work very cross-collaboratively. That's a great, thanks, Todd, for that.
Thank you.
So as part of Grow 2024, after we got that $52 billion number, we set out to figure out how does AgriNovus actually help drive something like that forward in a measurable way. And so what we decided was that by 2024, so in 6 years, we worked with our board and the experts in our fields, and we came up with, we wanted to grow the ag bioscience economy by $4 billion by 2024. That was our North Star and where we were headed. And we were going to do that through a number of ways that I'll touch on here in a second. But I want to share this, that in 2022, we just wrapped up our kind of milestone checkpoint to see how we were trending. And in that milestone checkpoint, we've already beat the $4 billion number. So we actually hit $58.1 billion in the state of Indiana. And these numbers are really exciting. We're really pumped about it. But to me, what is the most exciting is kind of how we do it. And so how we've done this and how we've supported this growth is through a couple different product lines, is what we call them. Business growth. So we're out there looking to attract and retain businesses to the state of Indiana to either bring operations, to really plant their flag here in the state and give them a place to grow their business and go. And we've seen in the last couple of years some really exciting things with Corteva, Elanco, some big organizations coming, but also some other organizations that have left their West Coast areas and come to the state of Indiana. The other side of this is startup acceleration, which is kind of where this whole conversation is going. But I wanted to lay this foundation because I think it's important to understand kind of how did the ag bioscience guys end up working in the food insecurity space, because it doesn't necessarily make a one-to-one connection. And we do all of this then through both sides of that is then tied together through our thought leadership. And so we do a lot of research, we do marketing communications, we share a lot of stuff. We've got a podcast that we would love for you all to check out as well. But those things lead us to where we're going. And so next up is a report that we did in 2021 with Purdue and EY Parthenon that really took a look at what happened throughout the COVID pandemic. And that's where Hunger Tech really came from. And one of the things that was the most interesting for us was, and this is a lot of information here, I'll be happy to share the deck after the fact. You don't have to take all this in, but I think the line that is the most important here is, and what catalyzed to us this opportunity was, food access in the future may be less dependent on transportation or proximity to a full-scale retail outlet and more dependent on reliable, accessible internet. And so our CEO, Mitch Frazier, saw this blurb literally in this huge document that we had gone about. And he said, hey, I think not only is that an ag bioscience problem, but that's an Indiana problem. We're great at tech. We're great at growing food. And we should be able to take our expertise in those fields and figure out how to help food insecurity, especially when it's going to be reliant on that reliable, accessible internet. And so that's where the Hunger Tech Challenge kind of grew from. We then started kind of putting out our feelers to really understand what was going on in the space, what were the options for those who were food insecure, and really taking a look at kind of how this all played out in practice. And we have a lot of really amazing resources in our area, especially in central Indiana, with folks like Gleaners. That's 21 county coverage for food pantry. That is an incredible resource. I think if they're not the biggest in the country, they are one of the biggest in the country. And the fact that we have that right here in our backyard to support our food insecure neighbors is a huge opportunity. But AgriNovus as a whole saw Hunger Tech in a little bit different of a lens than the traditional food insecurity support side. And what I mean by that is we saw this as an opportunity to create technology to address food insecurity and nutrition using business opportunity creating innovation. And I'll highlight this: business opportunity creating. This for us is, how do we go about looking at food insecurity in a way that can create sustainable revenue for an organization or an idea that isn't dependent on the traditional funding sources for a lot of food security systems, which is either government support or donation philanthropy. Because we felt like there is an opportunity here to create potentially impactful business. And you're going to see this a couple times on this deck, because it's like almost my tagline at this point: to do good by also doing well. It could add to the Indiana economy, but while also impacting those who are vulnerable and need help, and do it in a way that's responsible and help drive that forward. And our thought process in doing that is that if it creates sustainable business, it also doesn't take away from those important resources that those donations and those philanthropy and the volunteer networks are already going to. Our theory was, if we create something that is standalone, then we're additive to the support system and we're not fracturing or taking away from it. And so that's where Hunger Tech came from. Last year's Hunger Tech Challenge was really geared toward using mobile technology to help SNAP beneficiaries access and get delivery of SNAP purchased items. So many of you probably are aware of this, but the USDA had an online SNAP pilot that was authorized back in 2015 to allow grocery stores to accept SNAP benefits online, that basically slow played until the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden, it was of extreme importance that we could accept SNAP payments online. And a whole bunch of big players hopped into that space to really help our food insecure neighbors. And so we also saw an opportunity there to bolt on to the end of that and be an opportunity to not only be able to have food insecure neighbors place orders online and get their groceries ordered without having to go into the shop, but also potentially to plug in and help get it delivered to them last mile. And so we really leveraged this for last year's Hunger Tech Challenge. And it was a super success. We had 18 teams join us for the challenge, 11 of which got to the end and submitted their final pitches to be judged by our expert judges. And we got to the end, and Bloomington-based Civic Champs was the team that won. They had a solution that plugged right into, you could order your groceries on Walmart.com, and then technology allowed them to then connect with the end user who ordered those groceries. And then Civic Champs used their existing corporate volunteerism platform to enable that final mile delivery for SNAP users. They, in the month that we ran the challenge, they already had the MVP on market, and they were delivering groceries. And then in the 6 or 8 months that ended the year, they were able to dive deeper into that and get some great learnings.
Geoff,
And
can you talk a little bit more about the source? I think you mentioned 18 teams at least started.
yeah.
And where did they come from, and kind of who were they? Were they existing organizations like Civic Champs, de novo entrepreneurs, students? Was there a pattern even?
Yeah, Todd, that was to me, that was the most exciting part, was they ranged anywhere from student entrepreneurs. I had teams from IUPUI in an informatics class that were part of it. I had some Purdue students. I had some IU Bloomington students, all the way to venture-backed existing companies that were looking to dive into the space to make this kind of an impact. Civic Champs was not the only existing company that was part, but it really ranged. And I think one of the things that is super exciting for me is how many people seem to have the heart to dive deep into creating business opportunity that can also impact those who are less fortunate than us. And it's super exciting to see that that heart kind of come out in those. Honestly, some of you may have even been on because last year we did a live end of the program showcase where they pitched live and we judged live. And it took about 45 minutes to get the judges to come to a consensus because it was such an incredible group of solutions. And so it's such a wide range of what's out there. And really, we get involved by spreading the word, like conversations like this, and making sure people are aware that these are options that are out there. And we're here as an organization, whether it's in the challenge or not, to support driving that kind of business innovation forward.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things that is always kind of asked is, how many times are we going to do this? How many times does Hunger Tech continue on? And it's a really tough question, because the truth is our goal is to not have to run Hunger Tech. Like, we would love to just solve food insecurity, but many of you on this call know, especially from the healthcare side, like, it's such a complex topic that we're going to keep bringing awareness to it and running the challenge as long as we feel like we can make an impact with our food insecure neighbors. And so that takes us to this year. This is a lot of information. I can break it really down simply for you, is that this year's Hunger Tech Challenge is really geared towards some research that we did with the Center for Demand Forecasting and Sustainability up in Purdue University, that really geared us toward using technology to create solutions that go after targeted populations that are experiencing food insecurity, and helping them connect to both the food for-profit and nonprofit food networks. So we're talking, this is like grocery, this is pantry, this is church, wherever folks are getting food security support, we think there's an opportunity to create tech-enabled business that can help bridge that gap, give them a better experience, and also get them more food secure in the long run. And so that's the challenge that we've kicked off this year. And we're really excited. We've got 18 more teams that have joined us this year. I said last year, I'm not sure I could handle 18 more teams. And here we are again for a second year of doing 18 of these. But this really comes down to the why. And many of you know this. This is an oversimplification of what goes on in the space. But the truth is, why Hunger Tech? Because 13.5 million US households are food insecure. And this is something that is such a huge issue in our society. That's 10% of all US households experience food insecurity. Some things that I've dove into, and that's just using the current governmental evaluation criteria. If you dive a little bit deeper into what goes on and the complexities of food insecurity, I actually had a conversation with the Gleaners team, and one of them shared this with me, and it really kind of smacked me upside the head, was that food is kind of the spectrum that gives depending on how finances are going in a particular time. I've got to pay rent. I've got to keep the light bill paid, but I don't necessarily need to eat today. And this is something that our food insecure neighbors face, that decision every single day. And then if you start adding in factors of, and that's just the US poverty number that we're looking at there. If you really start looking at adding in things that aren't currently accounted for, like daycare costs, healthcare costs, things like that, that food insecurity number that they use to kind of figure out where that poverty line is actually much higher. And that can be even more challenging in the long run. In December of 2022, 13.4% of Indiana households reported difficulty purchasing food, above the national average. And one of the interesting things for me with this 22% of Indianapolis residents live with areas without close access to grocery. One of the things that we believe as AgriNovus of why we in Indiana should be the ones solving this problem is because we experience as a state all types of food insecurity. Not only do we have food deserts in our urban areas, but we've got rural food deserts. We've got stigma to break in our communities, and things like that are the reason that we think that Indiana is the prime place that we should be solving for food insecurity, and it's why we dive into this work as a whole. Now, why should we continue to drive in this? Well, inefficiencies in the food insecurity or the food security landscape continue to exacerbate those inequities as a whole. So we've got to find a way to be better connected for our food insecure neighbors, to be able to get them better resources. We've got some incredible resources in Indiana, Indie Hunger Network, Gleaners, folks like that are really building toward how do we make sure that we get resources aggregated and help drive them forward. But the truth is those inequities go deeper than just adding more funding to programs. At the end of the day, we don't think that the answer is, well, let's just add more money to SNAP or WIC or whatever those security systems are. We need to be more targeted and better action when it comes to getting food to folks. One of the things that you'll discover if you dive deep into this topic is that the common knowledge at this point is we actually do make enough food in the world to feed, or at least in the United States, to feed the hungry. We just don't have the logistics and the supply chain to get it to them. And that is an interesting and something that technology can really impact. Hunger Tech is also an opportunity to, as I said before, do good by also doing well. This is not a place to, line our pockets with gold because we created this business, but it is a place that there is business opportunity that can make the impact while also creating revenue generating sustainable businesses. And finally, creating that business meant to address access can have those positive implications for Indiana and the national economy, while also not diverting resources from those other support systems that are so important in our communities. This is the thing that we come at. It's the heart that we kind of dive into this from. And so the last, second to last thing, I apologize. These are the folks that have come along this year directly to help support the challenge. Elevance Health is the main partner. We've got Shipt, we've got Parkview's Moreau Center up in Fort Wayne, we've got TechPoint, AT&T, and Gleaners. And we have a lot of other folks who support outside of this that help make this possible. But I think it's really important to show how our healthcare partners are first and foremost, they see this as a place that needs to be solved, because I think we are in the billions of dollars that are spent each year on healthcare costs that are directly associated with food insecurity. And if we can help drive innovation to change the face of food insecurity, that's the kind of thing that can help increase that security level, change those health outcomes, and really, really impact folks as a whole. And so the last thing I've got for you all is a couple of points that I would love for you to just take away from this conversation. First, the problem is complex. It's the reason we think that it should be tackled under many channels, and it's the reason that we want our channel to not take away from any other support systems. It's really important that, if you find your niche of places that you want to support, or your heart is passionate about helping get food security, you should follow that path. And our idea around Hunger Tech is just one of those ideas. Second, those opportunities exist to create that additive level of support to increase access. So it's the reason that we're doing a second Hunger Tech, and it's the reason that we'll likely do a third Hunger Tech, is because that they continue to add, and we continue to work with Civic Champs from last year. They continue to drive their idea forward, and we're hoping that this year can plug in and be an additional layer of support like that. And lastly, there's tailwind in Indiana to help drive that innovation forward. If any of you feel impacted out of this conversation, that you want to dive deeper, you want to have conversations with me, you want to take a look at the research that we've done, this is the time, because getting involved is how we all take part in solving this and really driving health outcomes in the long run for our neighbors all across the country as a whole. So with that, I know we're about half hour in. I'd love to turn it over, see if anybody has any questions that we can dive into, and I'll stop my share so I'm not seeing the whole screen.
Well, thanks, Geoff. That was great. Really appreciate the insight into Hunger Tech and beyond, right? It's a lot more than just that, but that is certainly a key signature initiative. I had a quick question that I'm hoping some others will jump in as well. Again, either type it in the chat or Nail, just unmute yourself and talk would be great. But you talked a little about continuing to work with Civic Champs. How can you or we, and I'd love to put Kelly School resources behind this as well, help scale these innovations even beyond Indiana? Because certainly having an impact here is really important, but if could go multi-regional, even national, think about how powerful that would be in terms of creating jobs and other things in the area.
100%. So I think you all, Kelly School, like what a lot of these entrepreneurs and folks that are part of the challenges, they need the expertise and support and understanding how that goes about. I think the overall business mindset, like a lot of folks that come into, especially the challenge that deals with food insecurity, they often kind of come from the more traditional layer of maybe nonprofit-ish mentality. And we work really hard on trying to understand that, like, that's a great mentality and we need it, but it's a place where we could potentially be pulling resources from someone else. And so if we can focus into a for-profit mentality and really look at how do we scale, how do we put those practices in early, so when we do get to the point where we scale, that is something that's kind of innate in the business. And those kind of resources of just like mentorship or connecting with the teams that are part of it, like that's such a key piece that can be leveraged all day long. And so we'd welcome that from anybody on this call who's inspired to do that, or from the Kelly School as a whole. We would love to have that kind of support for these teams, just to even just bounce it off of as they are looking to grow and scale the idea, or think about what grow and scale looks like.
Excellent, thanks. Others?
Yeah, other questions? Don't be shy.
Was the president of a transitional housing nonprofit for 6 years, and I definitely understand when you use the word complex issue. So we were in a rural county, Montgomery County.
Yeah.
No transportation, little jobs, close proximity to a few things, which couldn't afford anything. So, and you couldn't get to a job. So it's just so complex. I mean, it's not just the food, it's everything around the food. And then one of the things that was one of our more eye-opening challenges, as my wife and I were both involved in running this for 6 years. You can provide the food, but that's not where it stops, because many people don't know what to do with the food when they have it. So yeah, it's just extremely complex, and many times being in IT, I'm in IT, have been for many years. It's like, why can't we tie these things together? I mean, we had 2-on-1, but I mean, it continues to improve, but it still is not a solution, because most of those options aren't close to a rural county. So, technology, we were trying to plug people into things like, right, all your different ride share options and those types of things. Yeah, there was no taxi or no bus, nothing like that. So yeah, it's just technology. I applaud you and wish the best, because it is a way of at least a partial solution, right? That can help. And I like that you pointed out, it is a, I like to use the term additive. There is no one solution. You just continue to look for one more thing to make things better. And every time you think you got one step forward, you realize, oh, that opens up your eyes to another issue that you got to solve. But doesn't mean we stop. We just got to keep pushing forward and learning. So definitely appreciate what you're saying, and appreciate that there's a lot of people trying to apply technology to serve this, because we sure learned a lot during our 2 terms of running that program. And it was, the heart that you talked about. Anybody involved with any of these types of efforts just has a lot of hardware that wouldn't be there. It's just part of what draws people into this. But I was very intrigued, I guess, by your tagline, you called it. To me, there's your draw, right? Because philanthropy is hard. I learned that too. Especially in a rural community, because you don't have as many big name companies right out your back door to go to draw in, and money tends to like to stay in its area for these types of things. So that's a tougher challenge, but yeah, definitely appreciate what you're doing, and it's a good thing. So.
And Geoff, if you'd ever like to connect offline, I'd love to pick your brain a little bit about your experience too, because I think that's something that because of how complex the issue, and we recognize, you know, some of the rough numbers that we've pulled is that even by focusing on technology solutions, we acknowledge that some numbers say we could be legitimately in Indiana excluding 20 to 25% just because they don't have technology access, or they don't, or they're not comfortable with technology. And kind of part of that additive mentality is we've just got to go what we can here, and we'll do the best we can with this set of parameters. And then I know there's huge, Indiana's putting huge resources in broadband in rural areas, Wi-Fi, things like that, that will hopefully bolster that kind of technology adoption in the long run. But it's still something that we're fully aware that, you know, it's not one solution fits all, because if that was really the case, I truly believe our government would have solved it, if it was that simple. But to your point, Geoff, and one of the things, I didn't touch on this in the conversation, but one of the things, I'm glad you brought this up, that this year's Hunger Tech Challenge kind of has a sub bullet that I'm pushing very heavily, is that thought around also be thinking about how do we help level up education on our solutions of, you know, I'm not going to buy an eggplant if I don't know what to do with it. It's just not an option. And even if somebody gave it to me for free, it's more likely to end up in the trash if I don't know how to prepare it, how to make it palatable. And then you also start dealing with other things that we should really be thinking about, which is, you know, cultural sensitivities, and, you know, what kinds of food is important to specific types of folks.
Right.
These are all things that are really important when it comes to thinking through food security. It's not just, you know, give them a box and let them run with it. There's a lot more complexity to it. And we're really working on kind of helping the teams understand there are multifacets to this as well, of helping make, because, you know, ultimately, and we've talked a little bit about this in the challenge so far, is food access is not actually the end goal. Food access is kind of the bare starting point, because our long-term goal is how do we help get better nutrition decisions made? Well, we got to get the food access piece first, and then we can start talking about how do we help change behavior. So I want to have that salad or something like that, rather than, you know, the soda and chips that I might be used to eating. These are things that are long-term goals, but we got to do the first things first. And it is such a complex thing. So thanks so much for sharing. And I'd love to chat with you if you ever want to let somebody pick your brain.
Geoff, we had a great question in the chat here as to how you coordinate with clinicians working in these areas, particularly with populations with food deserts. I know from my time at Regenstrief that they have some efforts in this area and could be a resource, but for the federally qualified kind of population, can you talk just a little bit more about connections to health systems and specific clinicians?
Yeah, so the big thing for us right now, and we even have a couple teams looking at this, is this thought around leveraging the clinicians or those systems to be able to help alleviate challenges in food deserts. You know, the one thing I even think we're seeing it here in the local area is, you know, food as medicine is a big deal. There's a lot of kind of what I would call a tailwind heading into that space. even so much as like food prescriptions and things like that, where you can literally get a prescription from your doctor for this specific food and walk out the door with it. And we're trying to explore a little bit of how we may be able to leverage that in a better way, especially with big players like Elevance and Parkview and some other folks that are really interested in the space. But we also are open to trying to understand what the clinicians need too. And that ultimately really comes down to, we've got a few people that are willing to give us some advice, but Spencer, I see you put that in the chat. If you've got any connections or you yourself want to have that conversation, we would be open to how we can better do that, because that is something that I think that's really important as a whole, because it really gets to the heart of the issue, right? Food is such a predictor of health outcomes, food access, food choices, and the more we can be building solutions that also help clinicians, dietitians, folks like that be better engaged and also be able to give legitimate resources that can help, I think is really important. We keep coming back to the big challenges for us really are around like, how do we get that access, and then how do we begin to incentivize changing behavior? And I think using clinicians and helping leverage that is a huge opportunity there. I'm not sure what it exactly looks like, but those are things that we're exploring.
Great. Thanks, Spencer, for the question. Geoff, you talked a little bit about the Hunger Tech 2023. Can you give us a few more details on kind of the timing of that and how any of the group here can get involved or help if they're so inclined?
Yeah, 100%. So first and foremost, yes, you can get involved and help if you're on this call or if you're watching this even after the fact. Just shoot me an email. I'd love to get you plugged in. Use the expertise and the knowledge and just the overall passion if you've got it for it. The challenge itself is currently running. So we're in the midst of, we just kicked it off, so it's very early. And we've got about 5 weeks of ideation and business idea discovery over the next 5 weeks with the teams that are in the challenges. We're going to be hooking them up with folks who want to mentor, give advice, share feedback, just give personal anecdotes, stories, understanding those things. And they're going to be working toward building that final business pitch as the final deliverable of the challenge. Now, there are going to be some that are in the challenge that get all the way to the end and they've got a business up and running and it's working and they're making money. There's going to be others that their final pitch is more of like, hey, if we get the $25,000 at the end of this rainbow, this is what we want to build and how we will go about it. But the big goal for us is to help catalyze as many of these business ideas and get them to market as possible if we're able to. And we want to support them. The teams that are part of the challenge, those who are in it, they own 100% of everything, including the winner who gets the $25,000 grand prize. There's no equity owed. There's nothing like that. They get to keep it. We're just here to help, as AgriNovus, support it because it does good for the state of Indiana and helps our food insecure neighbors while also creating business. And then at the end, we hope they'll get their product to market and be able to make the impact they're doing. Civic Champs is a great experience or an example of that, who are on market, giving that final mile delivery. And the only thing that we ask is, can we get information and data from you at the end that allows us to then share insights with the broader public that are interested in helping folks in the long run. Obviously, any data, all of that stuff's all anonymous, but it's really geared toward how do we help leverage the community to make better options available and drive forward. So I think ultimately that's kind of where we're headed. The final, we're hoping to have the final winner announced sometime in mid-June. And then I continue on. So we'll continue to then dive into more research and figure out other opportunities to impact health outcomes and food insecurity. And so if any of you want to be involved, Todd can share my email address. I'd love to chat with you, love to get involved. I see Brian did ask one quick question. I know we're at time, so I'll be really quick.
Yeah, that's a great question though. And if you don't mind, if people have to drop off, we completely understand, but love to hear you tackle this one briefly.
Yeah. So Brian, to your, there are a couple initiatives that are trying to drive into that in a couple different ways. So one, we're seeing kind of that neighborhood convenience store piece / I actually, maybe unfairly, so forgive me if anybody's offended by this, but I also kind of lump the neighborhood convenience store and the dollar store, Dollar General, into the same bucket, because I think they're more of a stopgap in communities than they are a traditional like grocery, full-scale grocery store. But we're seeing a lot of movement, one, on those fronts to bring in fresh, healthier choices. There's one right up here near the CICP building on 16th Street. It's called DG Market. And they're really trying, it's Dollar General, but it's their new kind of fresher options to try to help get those into the community. And with Dollar General by themselves, I think they have 17,000 stores in the United States, whereas Walmart only has 4,500. It's really a huge resource to our rural communities and our food desert communities that I think we see them shifting. But there are also some programs from the federal government side that I think are really interesting. Parkview is a good example of this. Up in Fort Wayne, they've helped bring out a program where I believe it's at some farmers markets. They're able to double your dollar by what you by purchasing better things. So if you buy chocolate, you can't double your dollar, but if you buy lettuce, you might be able to get $2 worth for your dollar. And it's an incentive program. And I think some of that tide shifting is going to help incentivize those better choices. I don't think that's all of it. I heard Geoff Simmons from Elanco, he mentioned it takes 7 years to create an eating habit that takes 14 more years to unlearn. And that's really stuck with me because I think it is a deeper thing than just let's incentivize it and people will choose differently. But also, I talked to somebody recently, and many of us that are food secure, food is also something that we use to celebrate, and we shouldn't not allow that to happen for our food insecure neighbors just because they're food insecure. And so there's this balancing act between all of that. And back to Jeff's point earlier, the education piece I think is really helpful. If we can help get better options and help get folks to understand how to cook things that are more palatable and more accessible, then they might be willing to take chances or do things differently, and it could ultimately impact. So I'd love to talk more if you want to dive deeper into that. I've got a whole host of opinions, no fact, but things that I think could hopefully drive some change. So guys, y'all are amazing. Thanks for being part of this. Thanks for being engaged and helping, and I'll let Todd wrap us up.
Yeah, so thanks to you, Geoff. Great presentation, very inspiring, and really working on good things. Just a reminder, this program is brought by the Kelley School and our graduate program in medical management. And we have a great collection of folks really passionate about issues like this in that program. Learning, in my case, I teach the strategy and innovation class during the summer. It's a program that you can enter at any time during the year. I'll bring it up real quick. So this is what it looks like. You can start in the fall with the leadership class, the winter value creation, which is more kind of finance and economics. Spring is more operations and marketing. And then summer, and I believe there are some students who are related to this program doing a project on exactly the topic, Geoff, that you were talking about, and learning from that, which is super cool.
That is true, Todd, and they're doing great.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording. Enjoy the rest of your day and follow up with either of us, and we'll share Geoff's contact information. Thanks for being willing to do that, Geoff.
Thank you all. Have a great day.